They say love is the answer, that if you love deeply, give endlessly, stay soft, the world will protect you, respect you, reciprocate. But not everyone sees love as a gift. Some see it as a liability, a door left open, a weakness waiting to be exploited. A person who depends on love may be destroyed by it. A person who commands fear survives, not because love is bad, but because it's blind and the world is not. Where love starts, strategy ends. You love your family, your friends, your partner. You tell them everything. You forgive them early. You justify what they do, even when it hurts you. And why? Because love removes the filter. You stop calculating. You stop protecting your position. You assume, if I would never hurt them, they wouldn't hurt me. But some would laugh at that. They knew even those closest to you will betray you if it suits their interest, especially when they know you won't retaliate. The danger isn't in enemies, it's in familiarity. Your enemies fear your silence, but the people you love, they grow comfortable with your softness, with your access, with your obedience. Over time, they expect your loyalty unearned, demand your forgiveness instantly, react with anger when you finally pull back. Because love, when unguarded, turns you into a tool, not always intentionally, but inevitably. Some didn't believe in removing love, they believed in containing it. You love with a ceiling, with a cost, with a plan. Because without a limit, love becomes emotional exposure, and emotional exposure is the most exploitable position a powerful person can be in. Let's get one thing clear: to be cold-blooded isn't to be cruel. It's to be aware of how people shift when they're too close, aware of what you give up when you become too emotionally transparent, aware of what love turns into when it goes unquestioned: entitlement. Some understood something most don't. The ones who love you unconditionally will still hurt you accidentally, and the ones who only stay close because of what you provide will hurt you deliberately. So the solution isn't to stop loving, it's to stop leading with love. The moment you lead with feeling, you lose leverage. You ever wonder why your advice isn't taken seriously by your family? Why your friends stop listening after they get what they want? Why your partner doesn't fear losing you? Because they know your love overrides your logic. They know you'll apologize first, you'll come back, you'll explain, you'll defend your feelings, you'll never enforce consequence, and that makes you predictable, soft, safe. Some warned us, it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But with those closest to you, being feared feels wrong. So you stop playing the game, and they start winning it. The cost of staying warm. You will lower your standards, accept behavior you destroy strangers over, forgive without reform, stay silent just to keep the peace. But the peace you're keeping is just everyone else's comfort with your weakness. And when someone is comfortable with your weakness, they will test it, then poke it, then exploit it. You don't have to stop loving, you just have to love with boundaries so sharp they cut. Let them see your warmth, but never without a wall behind it. Because the moment your love becomes unconditional, so does your pain. Strangers don't break you, it's always the ones you let closest, and some understood why. They weren't paranoid, they were precise. They knew that the people who knew your buttons, your boundaries, your soft spots were the most likely to push them. Not because they hate you, but because they've stopped fearing you. And when fear leaves a relationship, so does respect. Test 1, the entitlement test. They stop thanking you, stop asking for permission, stop considering how much you're giving. Why? Because in their mind, you're already theirs. They believe you'll always help, you'll always show up, you'll always say yes. And the moment you don't, you're selfish, you've changed, you're cold. But some would say, let them speak. That's just the sound of someone mourning the loss of their advantage. Test 2, the guilt reflex. You set a boundary, they get emotional. You say no, They bring up the past. You protect your time. They call you distant. It's not a conversation anymore. It's a maneuver. Because they've learned if they can make you feel guilty, they can make you reverse any decision. And if you flinch, they file it. They'll use it again. That's not love. That's emotional negotiation. And if you can't hold your line when guilt enters the room, you never had one. Test 3, the loyalty loop. You've been loyal, supportive, consistent, but when you're the only one doing that, it becomes expected. They stop checking in, stop reciprocating, start showing up only when it suits them. And when you finally pull back, they panic. Not because they love you, but because they just lost their emotional insurance policy. Some would tell you, if your loyalty is predictable, it will be exploited before it is appreciated. Test 4. Just this once. This one's dangerous. It starts small. Can you cover this? Can you cancel that for me? Can you overlook this mistake just this once? But the moment you give in, it's never just once. You become the person who can be bent because you've proven you won't break. They now know you'll bend your values as long as they stay close enough. That's not love. That's strategic pressure. Test 5. The you're too harsh defense. You speak clearly. You're too cold. You pull back. You're stone-hearted. You stop being endlessly patient. Now you're heartless. This is how they flip your strength into sin. But the truth, they don't miss your warmth. They miss access to the version of you who allowed them to act without consequence. And now that version's gone, they call it cruelty. But it's just clarity. Some would expect all this. They would say, the closer someone stands to you, the more they expect you to absorb their chaos. And if you don't, they'll call you cold. They'll say you're different. They'll frame your evolution as betrayal. Let them. Because the person who fears offending everyone they love ends up surrounded by people who love how easily they can offend them. The solution: stop proving you're good. You don't need to justify your coldness, defend your detachment, apologize for outgrowing the emotional systems they depended on. You just enforce, silently, consistently, without flinching. Let the accusations come, let the discomfort rise, because once they know the old version of you is gone, they either evolve or you let them go. And either outcome strengthens your position. Being cold-blooded isn't about turning off your heart. It's about defending your power with precision, especially from those who assume you'll never use it against them. Because if you don't protect your emotional center, you become the emotional landfill for everyone else's chaos. Some didn't build walls to keep people out. They built filters to test who was worthy of getting in. And once inside, no one stayed without constant requalification. Let's talk about how you create that same boundary power. Rule number 1, never explain your emotional distance. You don't owe an explanation for needing space, going silent, saying no, pulling back from toxic patterns. The more you explain, the more you give them emotional leverage. Some would say, to explain is to invite negotiation. To act without permission is to signal strength. So when someone asks, why are you acting different? What happened to us? Why didn't you reach out? You don't argue. You don't unload your reasons. You simply say, I've recalibrated. And that silence, that refusal to emotionally bleed, it commands respect, or it reveals who was never capable of giving it. Rule number 2, set consequences, not conditions. Most people set conditions. Don't talk to me like that again. If you do this, I'll get upset. Please don't disrespect me. But some would never beg for better behavior. They designed structures that make disrespect costly. You don't say, don't do that. You show, when you do that, I disappear, and you don't return when they panic. You return when you decide, if ever. Boundaries don't beg, they act. That's how they earn power. Rule number 3, never negotiate through emotion. Once someone knows you cry when pressured, you panic when ignored, you rush to fix when they go silent, they stop respecting your mind and start playing your emotions. Some would never allow this because emotional clarity is a shield, and once pierced, the opponent no longer aims at your mind, they aim at your wounds. You protect yourself by being unreadable under pressure. No long texts, no "I just feel like a" moments, no impulsive re-entry after being hurt. Your silence becomes your leverage, your stillness becomes your stance, and if they want your softness, they'll have to earn it again. Rule number 4, define what you tolerate and never wobble. Most people have boundaries that shift depending on who's asking, how long they've known them, how emotionally tired they are. That's weakness. That's emotional currency inflation, and it kills your worth. You need black and white rules like, I don't respond to yelling. Once I set space, it stays until I reopen it. I don't reward apologies without changed behavior, and then you follow through, without exception. People don't test what's enforced, they test what's flexible. Some didn't punish often, but when they did, it was surgical, cold, final. You must do the same, or they'll keep gambling with your forgiveness. Rule number 5, don't fear being seen as harsh. This is where most people fold. They know they're being used. They know their peace is being disturbed. But the moment they enforce, they feel guilty. Because society tells you, if you're not endlessly patient, you're cruel. If you don't explain yourself, you're arrogant. If you don't let them back in, you're unforgiving. But some didn't fear being called cold. They feared being called easy. And you should too. Let them call you what they want. Let them rewrite your character to fit their pain. Because when you fear reputation more than reality, you surrender power for perception, and perception changes nothing. You're not being cold, you're being uncompromising. Love without boundaries becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without recognition becomes slavery. Some would never die on someone else's emotional battlefield. They'd observe, withdraw, return when respected. That's not being cold-blooded, that's being in control. This is where most people hesitate. They say, but I don't want to become numb. I don't want to lose myself. I'm afraid if I go cold, I won't come back. That fear is real. But that's because people confuse cold-blooded strategy with emotional disconnection. Some didn't lose their humanity. They mastered when and how to use it, because in their world, and yours, feeling everything means being controlled by everything. Cold-blooded thinking isn't cruelty, it's control. You don't stop feeling. You stop reacting emotionally when your position demands calculation. You still love, care, connect, reflect, but only understanding where cold-bloodedness begins and emotional numbness ends is crucial. Many confuse the two, believing that to protect themselves, they must shut down entirely. But the truth is, cold-bloodedness is a refined discipline, a mastery of emotional self-regulation, not emotional suppression. It's the ability to observe your feelings without surrendering to them, to let your heart beat fiercely without letting it blind your mind. It's the knowledge that feeling deeply does not obligate you to react impulsively, to forgive recklessly, or to sacrifice your dignity. Some mastered this art not because they wished to be less human, but because they recognized the necessity of survival within the chaos of human relationships, where unchecked emotion is a currency spent too freely and lost too easily. In every relationship, there is a dance between vulnerability and power, between love and authority. The naive believe vulnerability is power, but power without boundaries is vulnerability. When you love without limits, you become the home everyone visits, but no one respects. You invite chaos, and chaos always demands payment. Some learned to balance this dance by establishing invisible lines. lines not drawn with bitterness or resentment, but with clarity and purpose. These lines protect their emotional territory, creating a sacred space where their love is an offering, not an obligation, where their kindness is a gift, not a duty. The world will test these boundaries relentlessly. It is relentless because it knows the cost of your softness. It will attempt to cross them in subtle ways, requests that start as favors but end as expectations, jokes that disguise insults, apologies without intention to change. But a cold-blooded mind recognizes these patterns instantly. It does not waste energy debating or pleading. It responds with calibrated detachment, enforcing consequences that speak louder than words. This is not cruelty, this is self-respect. It is the understanding that the preservation of one's emotional health is a form of strength, not weakness. When you pull back emotionally, you force others to confront their behavior. Some will rebel, accusing you of coldness, of abandoning the connection, of being different or harsh. But you must remember, those accusations are often mirrors reflecting their own discomfort with accountability. If your presence demands better behavior, their resistance is a sign you are on the right path. Some did not need to justify their withdrawal. They let silence speak the language of boundaries. Silence in this context is not absence but power. It signals that love, respect, and loyalty are not to be taken for granted but earned continuously. This kind of emotional sovereignty requires patience and resilience. The temptation to explain oneself, to soften, to placate is strong. The urge to return to old patterns of unconditional giving is persistent, but those who embrace cold-bloodedness understand that every concession without boundary is a step backward in the emotional game. They recognize that consistency in enforcement is the backbone of respect. It is better to be solitary in your strength than crowded in weakness. Solitude in this sense is not loneliness but clarity, a space where your values are unchallenged, where your identity is unbending. People who live by this principle rarely get caught in the cycle of emotional exhaustion. They do not invest their energy in convincing others of their worth or negotiating their space in someone's life. Instead, they create a magnetic presence by the very fact of their unshakable standards. Others are drawn not by the promise of easy access, but by the challenge of genuine connection. Connections forged not from need, but from mutual respect. This is the essence of being cold-blooded, not as a curse, but as a shield and a beacon. We live in a culture that glorifies emotional excess, demanding constant openness and vulnerability while punishing those who protect themselves. But some rejected this paradox. They understood that true power lies not in exposing every wound, but in controlling who sees them and when. They treated their emotional lives as precious assets, shared sparingly and only with those who proved worthy. This selective intimacy is not a betrayal of love, but its highest expression. It preserves the depth of feeling by preventing dilution, ensuring that when love is given, it carries weight and consequence. The irony is that when you stop offering love as a default, it becomes more valuable. When you make kindness conditional on respect, kindness is no longer mistaken for weakness. When you withdraw your energy from those who take without giving, your presence becomes a prize. People begin to realize that your silence is not indifference but a statement, that your absence is not abandonment but a recalibration. This shift transforms relationships from one-sided emotional debts into balanced partnerships. Some only experienced real loyalty and appreciation after the warmth was turned off, after the patience was exhausted, after the boundaries were made undeniable. This is the paradox of emotional power. It is often invisible until it is withdrawn. And once withdrawn, it commands attention. This is why cold-bloodedness can feel lonely at first. It requires a shedding of old attachments and illusions, a grieving for the versions of relationships that existed only in your hope, not in reality. But loneliness in this context is temporary and intentional. It is the crucible in which emotional clarity is forged. Some accepted this process not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. They understood that the pain of setting boundaries is always less than the pain of being endlessly violated. In practical terms, embodying this principle means constantly auditing your emotional investments. Who do you give your time to? Who do you allow inside your inner circle? Who benefits from your energy without reciprocation? These questions are not just philosophical, but tactical. Cold-bloodedness is not coldness, but calculation. It is the difference between a heart open to connection and a heart vulnerable to exploitation. It requires rigorous honesty with oneself and the courage to make difficult choices. Choices that prioritize your emotional survival over pleasing others. At the same time, this discipline does not deny the importance of empathy or compassion. Rather, it channels these qualities with precision. You can be compassionate without being a doormat. You can empathize without losing yourself. This kind of controlled empathy is what separates emotional maturity from naivety. It's the ability to feel another's pain, but maintain your boundaries so that their pain does not become your burden. Some wielded this skill like a sword, cutting through manipulation and maintaining clarity amidst emotional storms. There is also an inevitability to this journey. At some point, everyone who values themselves will face the crossroads between unlimited giving and strategic withholding. It's a personal reckoning where you must decide whether to continue living as a reactive participant in others' dramas or to rise as the deliberate architect of your emotional domain. This choice shapes every aspect of your life, from friendships and family dynamics to romantic relationships and professional boundaries. Cold-bloodedness is the refusal to be a passive player. It is the declaration that you are the gatekeeper of your own heart. The path is not without sacrifice. Some relationships will fracture under the weight of these changes. Some people will walk away, unwilling or unable to meet your new standards. This is not failure, but pruning, necessary to cultivate the relationships that can withstand true equality and respect. Some will accuse you of cruelty, forgetting that it is often the absence of boundaries that breeds true harm. Without limits, love is chaos. With limits, love becomes a sanctuary. Recognizing this distinction is the essence of emotional wisdom. In embracing cold-bloodedness, you reclaim a power that many never knew they had. The power to protect your peace, to command respect, to demand integrity in every interaction. This is not power over others, but power over yourself. The ability to regulate your emotions, enforce your boundaries, and maintain your dignity. It is the ultimate form of self-love, the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships are built. Some never understood this and remained trapped in cycles of hurt, while others mastered it and thrived in a world that respects strength cloaked in warmth. This mastery also teaches patience. You learn that not everyone deserves immediate access to your inner world, that trust must be earned and maintained. You become a slow, burning flame, not a flickering candle easily extinguished. And because you burn steadily, you outlast those who waste their emotional energy in storms. Cold-bloodedness is endurance as much as it is strategy, a commitment to staying true to your values, even when it means standing alone. At the core of this philosophy is the rejection of false dichotomies, that you must be either soft or strong, loving or strategic, vulnerable or invincible. Cold-bloodedness reveals that you can be all these things simultaneously, loving fiercely but selectively, strategic without cruelty, vulnerable without surrender. It is a nuanced existence that requires constant self-awareness and courage. Some avoid it because it demands discomfort and confrontation, but those who embrace it find freedom and power previously inaccessible. Ultimately, the journey toward this emotional equilibrium is deeply personal. It cannot be taught in a single lesson or adopted wholesale overnight. It is a lifelong practice of observation, adjustment, and reinvention. You learn to listen to your intuition, read the intentions behind words, and discern when to open the gate and when to close it firmly. Cold-bloodedness is not the absence of love. It is love's most disciplined form. The love that endures, that commands, that protects without apology. And so the question remains, will you allow yourself to be a wellspring of unconditional giving, or will you become the architect of your emotional sovereignty? Will you keep the gates open to everyone, risking chaos and exploitation, or will you build walls that filter, test, and protect? This is the choice that defines not only your relationships, but your very survival in a world that rarely honors softness without boundaries. Some have already chosen. The rest must decide, because in the end, power is not given, it is taken. Respect is not demanded, it is earned. Love is not unconditional, it is conditional on boundaries and integrity. Those who understand this have the keys to emotional freedom. Those who don't remain trapped in cycles of pain, confusion, and loss. The difference lies not in the capacity to feel, but in the courage to protect that feeling with precision and intent. This is the true meaning of being cold-blooded, not a heart turned to stone, but a heart sharpened by fire, resilient, discerning, and unbreakable.